Good afternoon. Perfect. Yeah.
I'm like the ESPN broadcaster, play-by-play now. Or the DJ. That's who you said.
Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. I welcome the witnesses and subcommittee members, as well as a few distinguished members that have asked to participate in this legislative hearing today. They'll be here at their convenience. As I've often said in the subcommittee, we operate in a nonpartisan way. I'm very proud of my Republican and Democrat colleagues for continuing to do so. We have 13 important legislative proposals to consider here today, and not all the proposals will move forward in this process, unfortunately. The purpose of this hearing is to hear from folks with expertise on assisting veterans about the benefits and shortcomings of the various pieces of legislation. Without thorough agency and stakeholder insight, the subcommittee would be unable to move several important pieces of legislation so far this Congress. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on their thoughts on the bills that have been noticed. A number of these proposals seek to improve the education experience for America's veterans and make it easier for veterans to receive accurate information about their options for using the GI Bill benefits and ensure that they get the best bang for their buck with the GI Bill. As a veteran who served for this nation for over 26 years, I know how important the GI Bill is for opening doors for transitioning service members to become productive members of society following their service. I specifically want to highlight my friend and colleague, Mr. Subcommittee's proposal, the Expanding Access for Online Veteran Students Act. For years, the subcommittee has heard from many student veterans about how the online monthly housing allowance is too low, and it puts many student veterans who need to take online classes during the summer because they have a family, a job, or not near the college at a disadvantage and struggling to make ends meet. Mr. Subcommittee's proposal would address these concerns head-on for student veterans who take summer courses. It would also allow students attending universities in person the fall and spring to not have to worry about putting food on the table during the summer. With skyrocketing inflation and the cost of living higher than ever, this bill will help fix and ensure student veterans have access to the resources they need, and I'm happy to be one of the original co-sponsors on this legislation. We will also consider bills to improve suicide prevention and outreach services and advance the home loan program. We'll also consider H.R. 5913. My bill will eliminate bureaucratic red tape and help the lack of accountability that veterans are met with when seeking employment assistance. While this bill would move DOL vets to a VA, it would not lead to employees being fired or the unions lacking representation. Instead, this proposal will allow for better accountability and oversight between Congress and DOL vets and ensure the agency is here to serve its veterans first and put everything else aside. Finally, we'll hear from stakeholders at the VA about the idea of a fourth administration. Over the last few years, we've seen VBA's number of employees dramatically increase. However, the subcommittee still hears significant concerns about the quality service delivered to veterans from the VBA. And to that end, I'm going to be asking the VA to provide the subcommittee with a detailed breakdown of employees at Veterans Benefits Administration assigned to address the employment and education needs to our veterans. And I think it's very important that the committee understand how these resources are prioritized. So essentially, I just need a list of troop to task, just in military parlance. I do have grave reservations about several of the proposals on the agenda today, and the witness testimony in question members of the subcommittee will ask today will hopefully address some of these issues so members can make informed decisions about these bills. We look forward to hearing from the members who've introduced these proposals as well as our witnesses on how we can continue to improve these bills and create more economic opportunities for veterans. I will now yield to my ranking member for 5 minutes for his opening remarks.
Well, thanks so much, Chairman Van Orden, for holding this hearing, important hearing, 13 pieces of legislation in Congress, including this committee. We've got some lost time last few weeks. We're making up for it, and I'm absolutely thrilled about that. And we've got some really important bills here that we need to get to the floor. One in particular, H.R. 3848, the HOME Act, which will mean thousands of veterans once again being able to travel to medical appointments and be able to receive assistance from VA as winter approaches. I'm similarly eager to advance many of the bills before the subcommittee this afternoon, including my legislation, the Veterans Assistance for Loan Origination Relief, or VALOR Act, pretty good acronym, to make homeownership more accessible for transitioning service members with disabilities. Under current policies, veterans who receive a disability rating after closing on their home may be refunded the VA home loan funding fee. However, transitioning service members with a pending pre-discharge claim at the time of closing are not eligible for a refund if they later receive a rating. The Valor Act would make these individuals eligible for a refund, eliminating this disparity. In doing so, it'll support disabled service members transitioning out of the military and setting a strong foundation for their civilian lives. Also on the agenda is Rep. Budzinski's H.R. 5785. This legislation would open up the Edith Norse Rogers STEM Scholarship Program to more veterans pursuing further education in science, technology, engineering, and math. This program has had exceptionally low participation due to overly restrictive guidelines limiting student veterans' opportunities. I want to thank the chairman for also including H.R. 3738 in today's hearing, which I introduced with Representative Wenstrup to establish a fourth administration within VA to focus on veteran housing, education, and other benefits. And Brad and I have been working on this for quite a while. This bill would more closely align VA with how our committee delineates veterans' policy issues and elevate economic programs at the undersecretary level, bolstering oversight of these benefits so they can be delivered more effectively. I do want to raise some concerns regarding the legislation to move DOL VETS programs to VA. The Department of Labor is our government's best place for finding employment resources and has been effective in running the programs within its Veterans Employment and Training Service. Some will remember that when this committee advocated for moving the responsibility for service member transition from DOD to VA, we highlighted that DOD didn't share the mission or goals of these programs, and that's simply not true for employment and DOL vets. Finally, I want to address a proposal to provide full monthly housing allowance for online learning for student veterans. We've got to continue making progress when it comes to providing veterans with access to education, and COVID showed the value in online learning opportunities. But research has shown clearly that you can't fully replicate the experience of in-person learning with online learning. That's true for veterans, it's true for everybody. I have 2 young kids at home, so I can attest to this one. I hope that as we discuss the Expanding Access for Online Veteran Students Act, we look at how we can improve learning opportunities, not drive more students to lower performing programs. So I look forward to our work today and moving forward to advance the strongest proposals to full committee as quickly as possible. And my thanks again to our chairman for holding today's hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. In accordance with committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Edwards from North Carolina be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, I'll now introduce the witness panel. Our first witness is Mr. Joseph Garcia, the Executive Director of Education Services at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Garcia is accompanied by Nick Pampern, Executive Director of Veterans Readiness and Employment Services, and Mr. James Ruhlman, the Deputy Director of Education Services. Our second witness is Ms. Margarita Devlin, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Operations and Management for Veterans Employment and Training Services at the Department of Labor. I will now swear in the witnesses. I ask the witnesses to stand in the first panel. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I ask the witnesses and members today to respect the 5-minute rule. I'm just going to say this. You guys know the deal. You've been here long enough that everybody stops at 5 minutes. So thank you for that. Mr. Garcia, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony from the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Good afternoon, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss pending legislation that would affect VA's programs and services. With me is Mr. Nick Pampern, Executive Director, Veteran Readiness and Employment Service, and Mr. James Ruhlman, Deputy Director, Education Service. Mr. Chairman, with 12 bills on the agenda, I will highlight several in my oral statement, as we have provided detailed comments in the full testimony to include areas of support and concern. VA would support, if amended, Section 2 of the Improving Service Member Transition to Reduce Veteran Suicide Act. Currently, VA Solid Start, or VAS, employees conduct personalized conversations tailored to the unique and needs of recent separated service members to increase awareness and use of VA benefits and services. VA has concerns that the bill may restrict the intent of the VAS program. VA would support, if amended, the draft bill that waives the loan fee for a veteran obtaining a VA guaranteed loan based on the date of the veteran's pre-discharge medical examination rather than on the date of a rating or memorandum rating for disability compensation. This would establish an earlier point for a veteran to be treated as receiving VA compensation for home loan purposes. VA supports, but is concerned that it could result in a complex back-end refund process that would be confusing for veterans, service members, lenders, and VA employees, and that the bill could lead to an unsustainable financial position. VA does not support H.R. 3738 that would establish a new Veterans Economic Opportunity and Transition Administration. VA appreciates Congress's focus on improving services and resources offered by these programs. However, the current VBA structure reflects the Undersecretary for Benefits' overall responsibility that does include programs related to economic opportunity and transition, as well as compensation, pension, survivors' benefits, and insurance. The VBA portfolio forms a suite of resources that veterans can rely on. VA supports the Veteran Improvement Commercial Driver's License Act. VA believes approval of a course offered at a branch with less than a 2-year operation period under certain conditions would provide more training opportunities for veterans, boost employment in this occupational area, and still maintain state-approved agency authority and oversight. VA supports the Deliver for Veterans Act. This is a veteran-centric bill that potentially increases the automobile or other conveyance allowance for veterans. Amending the law to include the shipping costs would remove a cost burden to any veteran utilizing this benefit. Finally, VA would also support, if amended, to establish an amount payable for the monthly housing allowance under the post-9/11 GI Bill for certain distance learners enrolled during the summer. Mr. Chairman, as always, VA is open to collaboration with you and the committee to ensure we are providing world-class benefits that our veterans have earned and deserve. My colleagues and I would be glad to answer any questions you or a member of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. The written statement of Mr. Garcia will be entered into the hearing record. Ms. Devlin, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Levin and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing. The mission of the Department of Labor, Veterans Employment and Training Service, is to prepare America's veterans, service members, and military spouses for meaningful careers, provide them with employment opportunities and resources, promote their employment rights, and protect their employment rights. Today, the subcommittee is considering the Consolidating Veterans Employment Services for Improved Performance Act of 2023, a bill that would transfer the VETS agency from Department of Labor to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and likewise transfer the administration of the Jobs for Veterans State Grant, the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program, the employment-related portion of the Transition Assistance Program, the DOL's Uniformed Services Employment Reemployment Rights Act enforcement responsibilities, and other related responsibilities. DOL strongly opposes this bill. DOL is the lead federal department for employment, training, and worker protection programs, with extensive resources and institutional expertise in those services, which cannot be replicated elsewhere. VETS is closely integrated with and depends on DOL staff and systems across the department to function. This includes VETS staff that are an integrated part of the public workforce system, which is administered by Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration and includes nearly 2,300 American job centers across the country. These one-stop locations offer a broad range of career wraparound services to the public, such as job training programs, unemployment insurance, child care assistance, and many other types of services, with priority of services for veterans. DOL is also one of the largest and most experienced grant-making departments within the federal government, and our grant officers are a part of the Employment and Training Administration's Office of Grants and Management. Our highly specialized USERRA compliance staff similarly work hand-in-hand with the Solicitor's Office. VETS depends on and closely collaborates with many other Department of Labor agencies and cannot properly function without all the staff, resources, IT, and data systems, and other support provided by and situated throughout the department, which cannot be replicated at VA. And if VETS is moved to the VA, then veterans will lose a significant voice within the public workforce system, as there would be no longer an agency within the Department of Labor that prioritizes and has the expertise needed to speak on behalf of this military community. DOL VETS has also been highly successful in accomplishing our mission, with positive performance outcomes for our programs. My written testimony details our successes at great length, but in total, across our programs, DOL Vet successfully serves over 440,000 veterans, service members, and military spouses each year. The data shows that all DOL Vet's employment and compliance programs are providing historically high performance outcomes. These outcomes are a direct result of the knowledge and hard work of DOL employees and of the processes and relationships that we've built within the department. And there is no evidence that moving vets to the VA would improve efficiency or effectiveness of our programs. On the contrary, it would be incredibly disruptive to our programs and the people we serve. The focus and time of DOL leaders and staff and the resources of our agency would immediately shift away from our successful institution and toward the task of implementing this costly transition to the VA. I know that we share a passion and commitment for serving veterans and military families. Regardless of the eventual outcome of this legislation being considered, I want every member to know that I will continue to work with you and your staff, as always, and stakeholders to improve and continue to improve our programs. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today, and I will happily answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. The written statement of Ms. Devlin will be entered into the hearing record. We're now going to proceed to questionings, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Garcia, your VA test, by the way, you guys know the deal. I read all your written testimony. It's great. So even though I'm talking to Kate here, it's about some details, but I've read it all, and it's very thorough, and I appreciate the fact that you put a significant amount of work into that. Mr. Garcia, your VA testimony states that the VBA's portfolio is thriving. Could you briefly go into a little bit more detail, specifically centered around the word thriving?
Sir, we are very proud of what we do at VBA, and some of the numbers that we have seen in FY23 are record-breaking. I can't speak for all the business lines, but I do believe in education service. We may have a disagreement on certain things, but Digital GI Bill, to me, is working for our veterans and for our school certifying officials. We just passed the 3 millionth enrollment in Enrollment Manager, so I can get into more details, but I do believe the record shows that VBA is thriving.
Well, so, sir, the last time that you came here and testified on behalf of the VA, we're discussing this, the issues with the subcommittee, and I can't agree with the word thriving. For instance, on August 17th, the ranking member and I, as well as the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization, sent a letter regarding our concepts of the Digital GI program. This letter had a deadline for September 15th, which was the anniversary of the invasion of Incheon, in case you're a history buff. Yet we didn't get a response until nearly a month after that, on October 10th. So maybe we have different definitions of the word thriving, Mr. Garcia. So if we ask you for a product and we give a deadline and it takes more than or just under a month to get that back over the deadline, I don't think that you guys are operating in an efficient manner, and that has shown a cascading effect throughout several of these programs. I mean, could you agree that that's a truthful statement?
For that one-time situation, I would agree, sir, but I don't think that conveys the entire year that we've had in FY23, for example. And earlier I did accept responsibility for that one situation.
All right, and so creating a fourth admin, essentially, in the VBA to handle economic opportunity issues would create accountability to make sure it doesn't happen again. I have some concerns about the government bureaucracy. Actually, I have a lot of concerns about government bureaucracy, but it's clear that there's something with the education program that might benefit from more attention at a higher level of the VA. One area that might benefit from a higher level of attention is the enrollment manager. And VA has touted its huge success. However, the subcommittee has heard that over 50% of school certifying officials have problems with the system, and our staff has witnessed these problems firsthand. That's a significant amount, Mr. Garcia. I just want you to understand that we have a different understanding of thriving, again, and I think success, and a 50% failure rate is certainly not successful, and that being able to have a different group that solely focuses on this at a higher level would be beneficial, and I understand that you oppose that. Could you tell me briefly why?
Sir, you mentioned enrollment manager. Again, I have a different perspective. We actually asked for a survey through our NAPA partner. I think you asked for it. The 21 top concerns with enrollment manager. The top 10, and I briefed this a few weeks ago at a conference, the top 10 concerns with enrollment manager 9 out of the 10 were already addressed with releases going back to May. So maybe there's a communication gap, but 9 out of the 10 issues that were raised were addressed, and the number one issue is also being addressed for December release. So I would have a different perspective when it comes to enrollment manager. I hear more positive news than maybe you hear. Mr. Ruman and I have visited SCOs at different conferences, probably over 1,000 SCOs, and so I get a different perspective, sir.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Devlin, can you tell me the funding level of the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program and how these funds are being distributed? And have any of these funds been redirected from this program without our knowledge?
Thank you for the question. The budget for fiscal year 23 for the Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program was $65.5 million, and that includes payments for obligating grants to HVRP grantees. It includes technical assistance. It includes stand-downs. It includes information technology infrastructure for the program. And without your knowledge, no, sir, we did transfer funds, but we did notify the appropriate committee per requirements.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, and I'll recognize Ranking Member Levin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garcia, in your testimony, you estimate that the Expanding Access for Online Veteran Students Act, that's my friend Mr. Subcommittee's bill, would cost $3.5 billion over 10 years. Does that estimate include behavior changes from GI Bill students, and can you explain what changes you'd expect if Mr. Subcommittee's bill became law?
Sir, so the bill, the way it's presented, is for summer programs, right? So we do have concerns, what does that mean? Because in our language, we have summer term, summer session. So we need some clarity on how summer programs are defined. Because as you know, we have the traditional schools that have the spring, summer, and then the fall. What about schools that, for example, have 8-week terms or rolling enrollment? I've seen that as well. So we need more clarity on exactly how that would work in terms of summer programs, for example.
Do you think the bill might incentivize students to take online classes instead of in-person classes?
So if you look at the top 20 schools, for example, a lot of them already are online, Purdue, et cetera. So I think those programs are already popular for various reasons. Adult learners tend to want to take online programs, so they're already popular. About 37% of those receiving monthly housing allowance, for example, are receiving the online rate. So that's a pretty high percentage already receiving the online MHA rate.
Got it. I think the University of Arizona in his district, I think, is one of those looking to take over. It's also my wife's alma mater. He's not here to defend the U of A. I'll turn to Ms. Devlin. In your testimony on the bill to transfer DOL VETS programs to VA, you point to a likely disruption in relationships with employers, workforce development agencies, and schools. Can you elaborate a bit on why that's the case and how that'll impact veterans?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Department of Labor VETS funds staff that are integrated into the American workforce system. And so as such, we are connected to all of the supportive resources that an individual might need. And this includes veterans who would otherwise not be eligible for VA services. So because of our eligibility categories being different, any veteran who walks in our door, regardless of their character of service, regardless of how long they served, will be eligible for assistance at an American Job Center. And if they have significant barriers to employment, they're also eligible for the intensive case management services. But we're also integrated across the department. So for example, when we're investigating a USERRA complaint where a Guard or reservist has had employment issues with his or her employer, we have the solicitor's office, which has specific expertise in the law around protection for employer rights, and that's not something that exists in VA right now. So when you think about all of those things, our connectivity to employers and schools and everything is associated with all of those factors and those connective tissues.
Appreciate that very much. You also noted that the American Job Centers conduct SNAP eligibility determinations is something I wasn't aware of. I'm curious, how long have they been doing this? And then do you have any data on how many screenings take place every year or how many individuals receive nutrition assistance as a result?
I do not have those numbers here with me, and I would have to come back to you with how long it's been, but I can tell you I started as a rehabilitation counselor in 1995, back when I worked for the VA, and I remember sending veterans to the DOL American Job Center to work with their DVOP to get such supportive services.
I think it would be great if you take that back and we get those numbers. I think that would be helpful for us to understand the scope of that work. Mr. Garcia, I'll turn back to you on the same bill regarding DOL vets. The testimony from DOL notes that USERRA compliance staff works closely with DOL's Office of the Solicitor, which has extensive expertise in the nuances of employment law. And because the Office of the Solicitor is not specific to DOL vets, my understanding is that it wouldn't be transferred under this bill. My question to you is, does VA have an equivalent office that would be able to assist with these important USERRA cases?
Mr. Pampering, can you take that one?
I appreciate the question, sir. Under the current construct, the USERRA legal department resides in DOL. We do not have that within VA.
So that's a no.
Right. Correct.
All right.
No.
That's important for us to understand. And 10 seconds left. Look at that. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Franklin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Devlin, you previously served as the Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits at VA, and in that role, you would have been tasked with managing both VA readiness and employment programs. Having served in both VA and DOL vets, which program do you feel is better equipped to serve the specific needs of vets related to employment needs?
Well, sir, I don't think I can answer that question the way that you've asked it, but what I will tell you is they serve different veterans with different eligibilities. So for veteran readiness and employment, a veteran has to have a service-connected disability to qualify, versus the American Job Center and the clients that we serve don't have to have a service-connected disability to receive services. So it's different. It's sort of like comparing apples to oranges in terms of the difference of populations that we can serve. But we work together, which is the beauty of it. So a VRNE eligible veteran who needs extra employment assistance or wraparound services, we work together. We have an MOU in place to work together with the Veteran Readiness and Employment Program. We have a monthly work group that meets, and even at the executive level, we meet with all VBA leaders of the Economic Opportunity Suite with my leaders at DOL Vets to make sure we're integrating and looking for opportunities where we can collaborate more.
So it all comes down to really whether it was just a service-connected disability or not, as to whether, given a preference of which direction you'd refer someone, would you feel more comfortable referring a veteran to one program or the other?
In many cases, I would refer them to use both programs if they're eligible for both. But if they're, so they just have different eligibilities. If a veteran doesn't have a service-connected disability, I would absolutely send them to the American Job Center. And I actually asked my son to go when he got out of the Marine Corps to go to the American Job Center for support.
Okay. Do you think there's any overlap between the programs?
There's not overlap, but they are complementary to each other. So they are different. So you've got rehabilitation counselors, which I'll defer to my colleague here if he wants to elaborate on the VRNE program, but rehabilitation counselors who provide a different array of services than a DVOP who's really focused on the employment piece and making sure the connectivity happens with all the wraparound services. So they're related and connected and complementary, but not overlapping.
Okay. Well, thank you. Mr. Pampering, if you could expand on that a little bit, appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. So within the Veteran Readiness and Employment Program, you're assigned a counselor, and you heard Ms. Devlin talk about over 400,000 veterans and service members and family members that they serve. Within the VRNE program, it's a shade over 130,000 annually is what we serve. And it's designed for employment at the end goal, but the counseling occurs with the veteran as they're going through, in most cases, a traditional 4-year college or university that goes through the retraining. One thing I would like to just state as far as the collaborative relationship that we have because of DOL's connectivity, in 2021, we launched an apprenticeship pilot, a highly underutilized pilot with our partners at DOL Vets. And because of that partnership, we've seen the apprenticeship program grow by 30% since 2021. And that's due to the interconnectivity that we have as DOL Vets and VRNE.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. McGarvey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all so much for being here. really appreciate, again, this is a committee where we care about our veterans. We care about how they are taken care of. I know you all share that goal, and we want to make sure they continue to get the best benefits that they have earned and they deserve. So one of the bills I wanted to turn to today is one that I know I'm a co-sponsor of. I think that the sponsor might be here as well. It's the Student Veteran Work Study Modernization Act. And this is a bill that will provide work study for veterans who are at least a half-time basis, meaning more vets from all economic backgrounds can access better schooling or vocation training while trying to make ends meet along the way, something we know happens frequently and we see certainly in my district in Louisville, Kentucky. Mr. Garcia, the VA recommends that H.R. 3601 be made permanent rather than the pilot program that's proposed right now. Can you explain why making this program permanent is important?
Yes, sir. Over 6,000 use the work-study program currently, and certainly reducing it to half-time would increase the access. The 5-year pilot I compare it to the Vet Tech program, another program that you're familiar with. That's also a pilot. What tends to happen towards the end of that pilot period, both the training providers and the applicants may get confused or don't pursue it because you have an end date to it. So that would be the reason why, using that example, why if it was made permanent, I think it would have less confusion, especially towards the end of that 5-year pilot.
Thank you. I agree with that. Ms. Devlin, I want to turn to the work of DOL vets and appreciate the work DOL vets is doing to make sure that our veterans do have employment when they come home, something that is so important as our veterans come back into civilian life. One area I want to highlight that we could collaborate more on, as I understand it, currently less than 2% of post 9/11 GI Bill recipients utilize the on-the-job training option for their training pathway to a family-sustaining career. Can you elaborate on DOL vets' efforts to promote apprenticeships for veterans, service members, and military spouses, including through the on-the-job training programs?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you for the question. So we work with employers, and one of the things we have in Department of Labor, of course, is the Office of Apprenticeship, which lends its expertise to vets, and we have employees in our own organization that have a really good understanding of it. We have a veteran employment outreach program, and what we do is we connect with employers and help them to understand how to develop apprenticeships. And then if they're interested in the GI Bill, as we have a really good collaborative relationship with VA, we can help connect them, help them to understand how to become eligible for a registered apprenticeship, which then makes them eligible for the veteran to use their GI Bill. As Mr. Pamper mentioned, we've also worked with the VRE division because it's important for a voc rehab counselor to understand that an apprenticeship isn't what it used to be, right? There's lots of apprenticeship opportunities to help veterans see the value if that's a path that they would be interested in. So we've helped them to connect more employers as well. And then, of course, we work with DoD SkillBridge and DoD US MAP to also make sure that employers are understanding how to reach transitioning service members before they get out of the military to connect them into employment through apprenticeship.
Appreciate that. What do you think is the rationale in our remaining time, why it's such a low number, why that number is at 2%, and what do you think we can do to get that up or help you all to bring that number up?
I think part of it is education and helping individuals, the service members and veterans themselves, to understand that there are high wages to be earned through apprenticeship. And I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding about what apprenticeship is, what kind of careers you can choose from. And so that education needs to happen. And also, I think, using the GI Bill for college, which is sort of the more traditionally accepted route, does result in a different housing allowance than if you go through an apprenticeship or an OJT option. And I think sometimes that can be partially reason because, you need living wages, living expenses.
And I think that's an important point you just brought up, so I want to hone in on it for a second. What is that difference in housing allowance if you're looking at a traditional 4-year degree or a training program? We've got 18 seconds.
I don't have the exact answer for that, but they are different, and I know we have VA colleagues here who may be able to answer that more effectively, but it's versus the full-time rate, it's based on the difference between journeyman and trainee wages from what I understand.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Crane, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garcia, there's a lot of discussion around the Veteran Improvement Commercial Driver's License Act of 2023 and whether the legislation as written would allow CDL schools to establish a branch campus across state lines. Does VA interpret the legislation to allow schools to open branch campuses over state lines? And if so, what safeguards are in place to ensure that the SAAs are still involved in the approval of these institutions?
Sure, the way the bill is written, if the branch follows the same curriculum as the main location, if you will, we definitely believe that SAAs ought to be involved. But as I understand it, if it crosses state lines, that SAA at the other state would have to provide that approval for the location in the other state besides the main office.
Thank you. Next question for you, Ms. Devlin. You were saying that the Department of Labor doesn't support 3738, is that correct? Bill set 3738?
Yes, sir.
I believe you said the systems currently under Department of Labor cannot be duplicated elsewhere. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yes, sir. One of the examples I would give is the Office of the Solicitor, which has attorneys that specialize in employment protection law. That does not exist in the VA. The VA does have attorneys. They have their own system there, but it's not that area of expertise. So that's one area that we would be lacking if we were moved to the VA. We also have other expertise related to employment protections with other agencies in DOL. And the other piece that's important is we are part of the American workforce system. So there are other services in that system that support the wraparound services that a veteran might need, and, you know, housing, food assistance, transportation, clothing, and things like that, that the VA cannot offer. And also, again, you know, as I mentioned before, the veterans who are not eligible for VA services are still eligible for our services in the American Job Center.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. The chair now recognizes Ms. Ramirez from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman, from the great state of Wisconsin.
You get 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'm learning. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today as well, from the many states that you come from. When I went back home during this August recess, I hosted veterans roundtables in my district. And one of the prevailing concerns that was raised to me was the issue of housing and homelessness for the veterans in Illinois' 3rd Congressional District. This has been a long-standing issue that traces far when I was the executive director of a homeless shelter. I had the honor to serve many veterans who were experiencing homelessness. And having access to secure and stable housing, we know, right, we all agree, is critical for veterans and their families. And ensuring they have the resources necessary to have a home is essential. Now, districts like mine, buying a home is becoming harder and harder. A home that would cost $300,000 now may cost $700,000. Rents that used to be maybe $800 are now $1,800 for a one-bedroom or a studio. So clearly, housing continues to be a big challenge for our veterans and their families. So I'm thinking about access to home ownership. Mr. Garcia, in regards to the proposal from my colleague, Ranking Member Rep. Levin, to retroactively waive home loan fees for veterans with service-connected disabilities, the testimony calls for a better process for service members to use the home loan program prior to discharge. Transitioning service members are given information about the loan program, my understanding, during transition. However, prior to that, what are the resources that are currently available for service members to know about the home loan programs?
Ma'am, can I ask Mr. Pemperin to take that one?
Sure.
Ma'am, the loan guarantee program is briefed out through TAP. As far as communications before that, a service member does have the ability to use the loan guarantee program. Specific communications related to that prior to, I would have to take back and talk with my colleagues in the loan guarantee program and provide you a better answer.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I think it's really important that we have different avenues to ensure that our veterans have adequate information about what resources are available to them, and certainly this one being one of those. I want to shift a little, and, you know, I've talked about housing, but the other priority for me here as a member of this committee has been to advocate for the importance of education and employment opportunities for veterans. Veterans who served our country deserve every single resource that is available to them. And we can't fulfill this promise to our veterans by compromising programs that have the potential to help veterans thrive while transitioning into civilian life. Ms. Devlin, this question is for you. You note in your testimony that the proposal to transfer the DOL vets to VA would remove subject matter experts from DOL involved with administering programs outside of VA scope. Could you elaborate which program specifically you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. Really, all the programs. However, what I think is important to note is for the protections, the employer protections for National Guard and Reserve members, when they have an issue and they have a case that we are investigating and researching, we have investigators who specialize in that, and I think this bill would move those investigators over to VA. But what the bill does not move is the solicitor's office, which is where we have our attorneys that provide that extra expertise so that when we have a complicated case, we have attorneys that can help us decipher and make sure we do everything in our power to protect that Guard or reservist employment rights and get their rights restored. So that's one example. The American Job Center and the Jobs for Veterans State Grant is another example of an organization that we operate that is integrated into an American Job Center that serves all veterans and all American citizens. And pulling it out of Department of Labor and moving it to VA would certainly restrict the access to those veterans, because now they would be going to the American Job Center without that advocacy of somebody from DOL vets being able to connect them and making sure that they get priority of services in that system.
Got it. Thank you. I have 14 seconds left, so I'll ask a question, and it's yes or no so that I don't get cut off by the chair. Will this transfer cause a disruption in veteran services? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am, it would.
Got it. Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Right on time. In accordance with committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that Representative James from Michigan be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection. Chair now recognizes Mr. Mervan from the state of Indiana.
Mr. Rodriguez, in 2015, a similar bill was introduced to move vets from the DOL to VA due to the concerns about vets' performance and outcomes for veterans. Has the performance of vets programs improved in recent years? What are you doing to measure the customer or veteran satisfaction?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we're actually doing a lot to measure satisfaction. In fact, what I'll highlight is for the Transition Assistance Program and the employment pieces of that we administer, we have the highest satisfaction rates. And we do that because we listen to the customer experience. We not only have surveys that ask specific questions of our transitioning service members about their experience in the class, we ask them for open text comments. And we go through all of those open text comments and we look for patterns and we look for things that we can change. And every time we do that, we learn something more about how to make the program better. And I'll tell you, our latest survey results, 95% of service members that went through our part of TAP said it enhanced their confidence in their transition. And we also have the Employment Navigator program, which is new as of 2021. And of the veterans or the service members that work with a navigator one-on-one, 98% said that the navigator either met or exceeded their expectations. And that's a pilot program, which we're making a permanent program. It's at several military installations. So we have done everything in our power to make sure we listen to the service member experience. And we recently kicked off a customer experience initiative in our Jobs for Veterans State Grant to make sure we understand, because the employment landscape has changed, how people look for jobs has changed. We want to make sure we're meeting that service member or veteran where they're at. And we've also, and this is just very, very fresh, started a customer experience initiative in our homeless veteran reintegration program. Customer experience is very important to DOL vets.
In your written testimony, you alluded to the multiple touch points that you have in the American workforce system and in the Department of Labor to support veterans. Can this network be replicated if you are no longer within the DOL?
No, sir, it cannot be replicated in the Department of Veterans Affairs. That infrastructure does not exist there.
Okay, thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Mervan. In accordance with committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Budzinski from Illinois and Representative Moyne from Guam be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Edwards from North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member and Committee. I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to wave onto this committee. It certainly is an honor, even though it'll only be for just a few short minutes, to share my support for H.R. 2830, the Veterans Improvement Commercial Driver's License Act of 2023, which is a bill that I'm leading to increase veteran access to timely, quality commercial driver's license training, to increase the truck driver workforce pool, and to help reduce the strain on our nation's supply chain that's currently worsened by the severe truck driver shortage. Across the United States, the trucking industry is facing more than 78,000 driver shortage, which some estimate could reach 160,000 by 2030. This shortage is complicated in part by burdensome red tape restricting veteran access to commercial driver's license training using their GI Bill benefits. Trucking shortages have a ripple effect, I know that you realize, through our nation's supply chains, worsening bottlenecks and delaying delivery times. My bill seeks to reduce the strain on our nation's supply chain and bolster workforce development among veterans by eliminating the red tape currently inhibiting veteran access to CDL training programs and increasing the pool of eligible truck drivers. Currently, roughly 8,400 commercial driving programs are approved for use by eligible veterans under the GI Bill, but a statutory 2-year rule under the GI Bill prevents these training facilities from accepting GI benefits at secondary locations for 2 years. This burdensome red tape has excluded many veterans from attending closer secondary branch training facilities that offer the exact same curriculum as a pre-approved facility, and it's been forcing veterans to travel further or wait 2 years to pursue their CDL. My bill would exempt new branches of pre-approved training facilities from the statutory 2-year wait to accept veterans' benefits and protects the integrity of the GI Bill by requiring that all secondary locations submit an annual report verifying their curriculum is identical to the primary location. This bill is a common sense reform with wide organizational support that will reduce unnecessary roadblocks to veteran training and workforce opportunities. And I look forward to working with the House Veterans Affairs Committee to move this forward. And if I may, I have one question for Mr. Garcia. And I remain grateful for the Department of Veterans Affairs' support of this bill. That said, concerns have been raised that the bill's language doesn't clearly require the secondary facility to be within the same state as the primary facility. My intent was to ensure that this exemption only applies to facilities within the same state. Do you know if the department has any concerns with their interpretation of this specific language?
Sir, so first of all, if it's good for the veterans, good for the economy, and we still have that state improvement agency authority and oversight are the main concerns that we have. And so, as you say, if that branch with the same curriculum is within the same state, we don't see any issues there.
Would the department prefer that it only apply within state lines versus nationwide?
I wouldn't say that we have a preference either way. We would gladly carry out that law as passed. We think there are probably less concerns if it's in state because the same state approving agency would be approving both locations and therefore would already be familiar with the business practices and the financial stability of the main campus, which would probably be advantageous.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, again, thanks for allowing me the time to be here. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. The chair now recognizes Mr. James from the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me this opportunity to speak on behalf of my district and my nation. We are all here because we believe very, very strongly that we have a job to serve those who've served us. I'm here to speak and seek a little bit of guidance for my H.R. 3816, the Veterans Entry to Apprenticeship Act. As a combat veteran and a former business leader, I recognize two gaps that we have in this nation. There's a skills gap with people who are able to address the jobs of now and in the future, and we need to do more with apprenticeship to allow the Veterans Affairs to recognize pre-apprenticeship programs and treat them as apprenticeship programs to lower the rungs to increase access for veterans. But there's also not just the professional side, but the purpose side. We are facing a hopelessness crisis in this nation, and veterans are bearing the brunt of this, and enabling additional resources for veterans to pursue the American dream without dismissing the reality of the cost to the American taxpayers are a part of the balance that we need to achieve. And I want to thank everyone, particularly the chairman, for allowing me to seek your guidance and advice on how best to do this on the Veterans Entry to Apprenticeship. I would like to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Ms. Ramirez, mentioning the criticality of housing. One of the components of this bill would allow veterans who are entering this pre-apprenticeship program to be able to allocate some of these resources to critical needs such as housing and transportation. But the CBO has already scored this at $60 million with an M, $60 million over the next 10 years. Do you have any advice for how we can proceed with lower or level cost, and how long the housing benefits should last, because housing is critical?
Sir, there are roughly 18,000 currently in the apprenticeship program for the registered apprenticeship program. Our concerns are that in the pre-apprenticeship program, that's not registered. And so that are our concerns that we have, that it kind of levels the playing field for veterans that would use and burn up their benefits for a pre-apprenticeship program. The concern is perhaps they do not have the same measurable outcomes from the Department of Labor. So it's a concern that we have to even accept this as an entitlement.
So understanding that there is a need and understanding that additional draws on resources might be a concern. What are some things that we can do to address this? One of the things that we looked at is state approving agencies, making sure that the programs that are approved meet the standards that are required for folks to be able to matriculate into jobs that pay well and actually helping veterans and not another government grift. Are there ways that we can make sure that we have this accountability down to the lowest level, but also making sure that we are able to help veterans where they need it the most notably with housing in this case?
Sir, we'd welcome to work with the committee and you on this initiative, but you're right on target. We would definitely want the state approving agencies to have that same authority and oversight to make sure that we have quality programs that would address the major concern that we would have.
This is a bipartisan bill. This is not a messaging bill. This is critical to the health of our nation, and echoing your sentiments, Mr. Garcia, if it's good for the veteran, if it's good for the economy, then we're generally heading in the right direction. We also need to make sure that we get it through the House, we get it through the Senate, and something that can be passed. The fact that it's bipartisan helps, and working very closely with you and your colleagues and me and mine, we welcome the opportunity. One last thing I would like to mention is as we move forward, if there's anything that we see that can improve this bill, I just want to state for the record, Mr. Chairman, that I'm open and willing to make whatever tweaks are necessary to help our veterans. And with that, I want to thank you each for your time and your service, and I yield the rest of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. James. The chair now recognizes Ms. Mays from South Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rulam, the Government Accountability Office report from September of 2022 showed the Edith Norris Rogers STEM Scholarship had an alarmingly low participation rate since its inception, raising concerns about barriers preventing beneficiaries from accessing the benefit. To your knowledge, has the VA done an extensive analysis of those barriers preventing veterans from using the benefit?
VA is looking.
Is that a yes or no, or have you guys done anything yet?
It's in progress.
Okay, thank you. Would it be beneficial to have more information about the barriers, in your opinion?
More information is always better.
How long will it take? How long have you been working on trying to get more information, and how long will it take to gather?
I can't answer that right now, but I can get.
Why can't you answer it?
I don't personally run the Edith Norris Rogers STEM Scholarship.
Okay.
But we can get that answer. We are aware of the study and the barriers, and we are looking at them.
Okay, super, thank you. The GAO report also highlighted the analysis the VA did of those who were denied the benefit was very limited. Isn't it true that this analysis didn't include denial reasons for both race or gender?
Could you rephrase the question?
Isn't it true this analysis did not include denial reasons for either race or gender?
We would not have denied them because of race or gender. I'm not certain whether the demographics were associated with that.
Okay. My office has worked closely with Wounded Warrior Project to come up with some solutions based off data they've found in their own Women Warriors report. Women veterans are the fastest growing population of veterans, but they focus also on unique challenges when transitioning. The unemployment rate among Wounded Warrior women warriors is higher than most male warriors at 10% compared to 6.3% of their male counterparts. Census data suggests that only 27% of women are employed in STEM fields in the U.S. workforce, but comprise almost half of the overall workforce today. So I look forward to working with you and the VA and my colleagues here today on this committee on this important legislation to ensure that we're addressing the unique needs of each and every veteran. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Mace. In accordance with the committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Kiggins from Virginia be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, the chair now recognizes Ms. Budzinski from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Levin, for giving me the opportunity to speak on my bill today. I very much appreciate it. H.R. 5785, the Veterans in STEM Expansion Act. Veterans put their lives on the lines to serve our country, yet they are still facing significant barriers to employment and educational opportunities upon returning. According to the Journal of Veteran Studies, over 200,000 service members transition to civilian life each year, and among their top struggles is finding a job and getting connected to educational opportunities. I believe everyone in the room can agree with me when I say that our veterans deserve better. Congress took positive steps when it passed the Forever GI Bill in 2017, which brought much-needed changes to veterans' educational benefits. Part of this major legislation included enacting the Edith Norris Rogers STEM Scholarship. Since enactment, thousands of veterans have used the scholarship to pursue STEM degrees after exhausting their post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. Though this has been great progress, student veterans have voiced their frustrations with some of the very limiting requirements. Additionally, a 2022 GAO report highlighted some of the barriers student veterans have faced when applying for the scholarship. Barriers have included meeting the credit hour requirements, exhausting GI Bill benefits before being able to apply, and the inability for student veterans to use scholarship toward graduate school classes. The Veterans in STEM Expansion Act would modify all three of those levers by reducing the minimum number of credit hours required to 45 hours. It would also allow student veterans to apply for scholarship even if they still have GI benefits left. The scholarship would only kick in after recipients have exhausted GI Bill benefits. And lastly, my bill would allow student veterans to use the scholarship toward graduate school classes. The changes proposed in this bill are straightforward ways to improve access to this important scholarship for our student veterans and ease the transition for those pursuing a higher education. I'm committed to working with my colleagues, the VA and VSOs on my bill to ensure we are all doing all that we can to expand STEM education for all veterans. And I do appreciate Congresswoman Sherfilis McCormick and Congressman McGarvey for already agreeing to co-sponsor this bill. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Budzinski. The chair now recognizes my friend from Guam, Mr. Moylan, and we wish you a have a day, sir.
Half a day, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of this subcommittee for allowing me to wave on to discuss this important bill that helps our veterans in Guam. I appreciate the current panel and their discussion about the bill and their support, but I also like to extend my gratitude to our witnesses in the next panel, respectively the organizations of Disabled American Veterans, Student Veterans of America, and the Veterans of Foreign War, for supporting our mission and endorsing our bill. I'm proud to represent a district that is filled with patriots who have served our country with dignity, honor, and respect. We must give them our sincerest gratitude and respect for their service. Being a veteran in Guam is not easy. From long waiting times at both VA clinics and hospitals in Guam to lack of complex veteran healthcare services, Guam's veterans have been left in the dark for way too long, especially our disabled veterans. Currently, there's a program called the Adaptive Vehicle Grant Program that provides $25,600 to eligible veterans so that they can purchase an adaptive vehicle. My bill, the Deliver for Veterans Act, will improve this program by allowing the VA to put funds from each veteran's grant towards shipping costs. To ship a vehicle to Guam, it costs close to $4,000. Under the current program, veterans are unable to use their grant to pay for shipping costs. This is a major cost that negatively affects our veterans in remote areas, like Mr. Crane's district, and my district of Guam. With this high transportation cost, only those who can afford to ship the vehicle will do so. This small fix in the program will allow more veterans to take advantage of this program that helps them in everyday life. Again, I want to thank the subcommittee for allowing me to weigh in on today's hearings, and I ask for their support in delivering for our disabled veterans. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to waive any additional time I have if I can have additional remarks regarding their support for this measure, please.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, sir, and I appreciate the question. VA does support this legislation. It's the right thing to do. Currently, we do have the ability to cover adaptive automobiles, just not the shipping. And as you were discussing, that's an additional financial burden. We know that in doing research that the average shipping cost is about $1,650. Obviously, Guam and some more remote places are going to be higher. But even just with the average shipping cost, that actually would stay below the average grant rate. Right now, the average grant is a little over $23,000. So just adding in that average shipping cost would still be below the max grant. It's the right thing to do, and that's why we support the legislation, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Moylan. The chair now recognizes the gentle lady from Virginia, Ms. Kiggins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me sit on your meeting today to talk about my bill, H.R. 5956, the GI Improvement Act. I just wanted to briefly describe it. In exchange for serving our country's veterans get a chance to pursue almost any post-secondary education they want, whether it be for college, graduate school, or training. I was able to use my GI Bill to go back to nursing school. We're currently using my husband's GI Bill to provide education for one of our children. So it's a great benefit that we need to be very protective of and make sure our veterans are able to use it to the best possible extent that they can. The GI Bill has been life-changing for millions of our nation's former service members. In 2022, more than 800,000 veterans had been using their GI Bill benefits. Unfortunately, understanding the benefits of the bill can be incredibly complicated and overwhelming. The GI Bill comparison tool is something that we have now. It's a vital part of navigating these benefits. It's used widely by veterans. It's a web-based portal that's supposed to provide just a simple, easy way to access the different information to compare universities for our veterans. Every school who accepts the benefits offers this GI Bill comparison tool to their prospective students, but it hasn't been updated for quite some time. Additionally, many different federal agencies collect data that I think would be useful for veterans to know, including graduation rates, student loan default rates, and others. My bill seeks to increase transparency and centralize this useful information for veterans within this already existing tool and would require VA to work with other agencies and key department stakeholders to continually update the tool as more information becomes available. Some of the new information that would be included on this portal would be retention rates, transfer rates, graduation rates, credentials, certifications available, average duration of degrees, student loan default rates, student loan repayment rates, and more. So it provide a lot more information when veterans are comparing just different schools that they may use their GI Bill benefit at. By providing this additional information, my bill allows those seeking to use their GI Bill benefits to attain education to make the most informed choice possible. I introduced this bill to improve transparency and provide more resources for those looking to use GI Bill benefits so that veterans can be well informed when deciding how to use them. It will help our veterans to be well informed, and it will increase educational opportunities for our nation's heroes. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kiggins. Thank you. The witnesses are now excused. I hope you all stay around for the second panel.
So what is with the cars? So they have to pay to ship the car?
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's
Do they
too
have
much.
to do it in Japan too?
Well, Guam's is.
On our second panel, we'll hear from, oh, wait, sorry. Bring it! On our second panel, we'll hear from the following witnesses. Ms. Keenan, the Deputy Director of National Legislative Service for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Mr. Bearfield, Assistant National Legislative Director at the Disabled Veterans, American Veterans. Ms. Bartlett, Vice President of Government Affairs at Student Veterans of America. Mr. Westcott, Legislative Director at the National Association of State Approving Agencies. And Mr. Hazard, Veterans in Piping Program Manager for the United States Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada. I'd like to welcome our witnesses to the second panel. And will you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Keenan, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to provide our remarks on legislation pending before the subcommittee. The VFW's views on all the bills can be found in my written testimony. I will take the opportunity to highlight a few. The VFW supports the Expanding Access for Online Veteran Student Act to increase the monthly housing stipend to the national average for veterans who take summer courses online. Currently, the monthly housing allowance for online courses is half the national average, which is simply not enough for many student veterans. If they take courses during the summer, even online, they should not experience a significant decrease in their housing benefit that could cause them financial hardship. While this is a step in the right direction, the VFW would like for student veterans to receive at least the full national average rate for housing, even if they are enrolled in degree programs conducted online for some or all semesters. Online education has adapted and grown since the COVID-19 pandemic, much like working from home has changed the work model. Student veterans, who are often non-traditional students, continue to require housing assistance to successfully pursue higher education even when enrolled in online programs. The VFW supports the Veterans Education Transparency and Training Act. This would modify the requirement for schools to provide a personalized shopping sheet with specific and individual information about costs and financial assistance. The new language would give schools more flexibility by lessening the barrier to receiving VA education funding. The legislation would also create a single VA website for school officials to find current training. Schools have told us this would be helpful because when they receive staff turnover, updates sent only by email get lost over time. We suggest adding to Section 1A that all policy and guidance updates be included on this VA website, as these are equally important as training. We also recommend that VA be required to update the information in a timely manner, because having a website with old information is equally ineffective. The VFW supports the draft bill to waive the VA home loan fee for service members with a service-connected disability who apply for the loan before receiving their disability rating from VA. Current housing market uncertainty has created an environment for service members where they may not be able to wait until VA has completed processing their disability claim before finalizing the purchase of a home when the right opportunity arises. This proposal would ensure that service members who have started their VA claim and conducted a pre-discharge exam could be reimbursed for the home loan fee if they receive a disability rating after purchasing their home. We suggest one key change: to replace the pre-discharge date with the effective date. The intent to file establishes the claim's effective date, and it never changes, unlike exams which can be scheduled and rescheduled. Using the effective date would avoid any ambiguity and would ensure that service members retain the earliest date for eligibility. The VFW would also like to ensure that if this proposal becomes law, that veterans have the flexibility to choose what is in their best financial interest. We would hope the options to pay down the principal of the mortgage or to receive reimbursement from VA would both be available, as some service members pay these fees out of pocket. And lastly, the VFW supports the draft bill to modify the requirements of the Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship. We support amending the specific credit hours required for eligibility, in addition to extending this benefit to graduate degrees. Barriers for students to utilize this scholarship should be lessened, as we want veterans to pursue and succeed in high-demand fields like STEM. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, thank you for the opportunity to provide my remarks. I look forward to answering any questions you or the committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keenan. The written statement of Ms. Keenan will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Bearfield, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting DAV to testify at today's hearing of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity to consider the 13 pieces of legislation up for discussion this afternoon. My written statement has been submitted for the record, and I will now highlight a few bills that are important to DAV and our members. In my early days after being medically retired from the United States Army, I can speak personally about the difficulties that I experienced when I left the military more than 25 years ago, when TAP was in its infancy stages and mental health services were not part of the program. Dealing with the pain of my service-connected disabilities and the uncertainty of what my life was going to be like after the military, I suffered from depression and anxiety. I could have benefited from having access to some type of mental health services. For example, H.R. 3722 and the amendment in the nature of substitute to it would provide valuable mental health services to transitioning service members, veterans, and their families. It is important that transitioning service members and veterans fully understand the importance of having mental health services available to them. I know and understand what some of the current transitioning service members and veterans are going through that have lost the sense of community that the military held for them. The men, women, and families who are going through this transition can benefit from knowing that valuable mental health services are available to them during and after the TAPS classes. DAV supports H.R. 5785, the STEM Scholarship Program. By broadening the eligibility and decreasing the number of semester or quarter hours required to become eligible for this scholarship, this will increase the number of students who wish to pursue careers in this very important area. Employees that have STEM careers make on average $93,000 per year, which is substantially higher than the national average. DAV supports H.R. 2830, as it would help ease the pathway for veterans to acquire a commercial driver's license, helping to address the trucking shortage, employ veterans, and strengthen our supply chains. This legislation would ensure CDL schools that offer courses at new branches do not have to wait 2 years if the primary institution has been approved by the VA and state approving agencies to receive GI Bill benefits. Many former military personnel have experienced driving large vehicles during their military careers. According to the American Trucking Association, there is currently a shortage of 80,000 truck drivers. There is a high demand for truck drivers across the country, with some positions paying nearly $100,000 per year. It is estimated that 8,400 commercial driving programs have been approved for use by eligible veterans under the GI Bill. This legislation would create unique opportunities for service-disabled veterans to obtain a CDL and overcome their employment barriers. Finally, Mr. Chairman, H.R. 3738 would establish a fourth administration within VA dedicated to creating economic opportunities for veterans, their dependents, and survivors. This would increase the visibility and accountability of all veteran education and employment-related programs. Anticipating veterans' long-term needs, not only for health care and disability compensation, but also for education and employment opportunities, a fresh, new approach is required. Given all the responsibilities of VBA and their focusing on claims and appeals processing, other programs have taken a back seat. For example, the Veterans Readiness and Employment Program started working on an electronic case management system for vocational rehabilitation counselors. However, after 9 years, 3 failed attempts for a digital platform, and over $20 million spent, VRNE still does not have a digital case management system. DAV believes that the failures of the VRNE case management system is indicative of a lack of focus, direction, as well as a constant change of administrations. This is one example of many why we believe VA needs a fourth administration. H.R. 3738 would be a huge step in the right direction to solving this problem. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you or members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bearfield. The written statement of Mr. Bearfield will be on the hearing record. Let's not do that again, please. Thank you. Ms. Bartlett, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. Seriously, I just said let's not do that again. Is it yours? Yeah. There you go. Adapt, overcome.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to testify before you today. And always, we appreciate the opportunity to share our views on the bills which will directly impact student veterans, military-connected students, their families, and survivors. We encourage the subcommittee to review our written testimony for the detailed discussion on the education-related legislation for today's hearing. My verbal remarks will focus on 2 bills. I will begin by addressing the Expanded Access for Online Veteran Students Act. The prevalence of online classes in higher education has skyrocketed in the recent years. This trend is prior to the pandemic, but the forced shift to online learning during COVID led many institutions to invest in methods to offer their classes online. And many institutions, including a growing number of flagship public and nonprofit universities, continue to increase their online courses offering, which appeals to the broader range of students, including post-traditional students, while juggling other responsibilities like family and jobs. Institutions are also exercising a new discretion in how they offer their courses, sometimes choosing only to offer certain courses during particular terms. And that's the important piece for GI Bill students and their MHA. We have reached an era in higher education where not only otherwise in-person GI Bill students are safe from the negative financial consequences of the outdated and misinformed policy of reducing MHA for online learners. I'm going to tell you a story about one of SVA's incredible chapter leaders, Josh Jones. Josh is an SVA Veteran Chapter of the Year and former chapter leader of La Jolla University in Chicago. Some of you may be familiar with Josh. He was recognized during the joint VSO and MSO hearing before the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs this past March. And it was shortly time before then, Josh flagged to SVA this issue that ultimately led to this bill. Josh and some of his peers soon found out that their institution was only offering the classes they needed online over the summer, and quickly found themselves enrolled fully online and only eligible for the reduced MHA rate for online learners. This slashed their housing allowance by well over $1,600 a month, leaving them grappling with how to make that difference over the span of the 3-month term. Josh recognized how fundamentally unfair this was, and with the support of SVA, spearheaded an effort to bring a legislative fix to Congress so other military-affiliated students wouldn't have to experience the same hardship. And in March of this year, members of the subcommittee heard from Josh and SVA about this very issue. So we're proud to appear before you today and announce our strong support for this legislation. While SVA would have preferred the bill fully harmonize MHA rates for online learners, there is no denying that that represents a substantial improvement over the current law that will roughly put an extra $1,000 in the pockets of online GI Bill learners over the summer. This bill represents a pivotal first step towards the ultimate goal of securing full MHA for online GI Bill students. SVA thanks subcommittee staff for their work on this legislation, and we applaud Representatives Subcommittee, Van Orden, Sansbury, and Stanton for their bipartisan leadership on this issue. Lastly, I'll turn to the Student Veterans Work-Study Modernization Act. VA Work-Study is an invaluable program providing participants with critical financial support during their studies, but the program limits eligibility to those who are enrolled at least 3/4 time. According to SVA's most recent survey, roughly 50% of our respondents have children, and approximately 20% identify as single parents. For most of these folks, enrolling at a rate that is less than 3/4 time might be the best fit for them and their families, but this cuts them off from the program. The bill before you today will address this issue by establishing a pilot program that expands the eligibility of those enrolled at least half-time. The bill will also require VA to collect and report important new information about how VA's work study is serving student veterans. This legislation is just one part of the larger effort to modernize VA work study. We commend this bill's sponsor, Congressman Cartwright, and his leadership in the Complementary and Comprehensive VA Work Study Improvement Act. That bill was first conceived by a former VFW SVA fellow, John Randolph, and would make critical refinements to the VA work study so that it can be perfectly serve its participants. This concludes my verbal remarks. Thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bartlett. The written statement of Ms. Bartlett will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Westcott, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, I am pleased to appear before you today on behalf of the 52 member state agencies of the National Association of State Approving Agencies. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments to this committee about the legislation pertaining to veterans education and training. H.R. 2830, the Veteran Improvement Commercial Driver License Act, while well-meaning, causes NASA great concern in its present form. As drafted, this bill sweeps away the protections provided for veterans under the 2-year rule for private and not-for-profit non-college degree institutions. That rule requires that these educational institutions must be in existence and approved for at least 2 years by other necessary state regulatory authorities. The institution must also have successfully offered the program for approval for that same period. This is an important safeguard, preventing an NCD institution such as a driving school from gaining approval without demonstrating a measure of quality and stability in its continuous operation. This bill as presently drafted only requires that an institution offer the same curriculum as a previously SA-approved institution anywhere in the nation and has met the requirements for licensure to apply for approval. When we approve a program for approval, particularly at a new location, curriculum is only one factor we review. We also carefully evaluate instructor qualifications, administrations, equipment, policies and procedures, and the technical ability of the location to administer the program. We do this to ensure that only programs that demonstrate quality educational outcomes for students are approved. To determine program quality, it is important that we have some record of success, such as graduation rates or job placement, to review and evaluate. NASA respectfully suggests that this legislation be amended so that the institutions which apply for a waiver from the requirements of the 2-year rule must be within the same state as the initial campus upon which the institution bases its application. Also, we strongly suggest that the legislation provides that the institutions must show a history of having successfully taught the program at that location for a set period of time, preferably 1 year, but certainly not less than 6 months. We oppose this bill in its present form. The Transparency for Student Veterans Act of 2023, this would allow student veterans to make informed choices about which schools and programs would be the best fit for them. It provides them the additional information to do that. We certainly support that bill. H.R. 3816, the Veterans Entry to Apprenticeship Act, while we certainly agree with the purpose of this bill, NASA suggests that safeguards be added to protect veterans enrolled in these programs. For instance, we believe that any pre-apprenticeship program applying for GI Bill benefits should meet the standards found in U.S. Department of Labor Issued Training and Employment Notice 1212. Likewise, we would like to see these programs demonstrate a record of successfully placing veterans into a registered apprenticeship program. And most importantly, we feel they must be approved by a state approving agency. So we support this bill, but with suggested amendments. H.R. 5914 addresses the need for veterans to seamlessly access their hard-earned education benefits to facilitate a successful transition to civilian life. This legislation amends the requirement for a shopping sheet to state that SAAs will only disapprove programs when facilities fail to provide certain forms to the maximum extent possible. Also, this legislation requires a centralized communication platform for improved communication between VA and SCOs. NASA believes this new language will ensure veterans have access to quality programs by providing flexibility to institutions such as police academies, truck driving schools, and other approved NCD institutions, while still providing adequate safeguards for veterans and their families. We strongly support this bill. Mr. Chairman, today SAAs throughout this great nation are diligently working to protect the quality and integrity of the GI Bill and to ensure that our veterans and their families have unfettered access to quality training and education programs. I thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. The written statement of Mr. Westcott will be entered into the hearing record. Before I recognize Mr. Hazard, I want to thank you for your persistence. I know that this has been a hassle to get you here, and I do appreciate it. And we're very thankful that you're able to make it.
Thank you, sir.
You know, how many times did it take now? A couple? So our house is more in order, and we appreciate you being here. So with that, I recognize you for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Van Orden and members of the committee. My name is Mike Hazard, and I'm employed by the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada, which we typically just refer to as UA. As program manager of the UA's Veterans and Piping Training Program, or VIP program, I want to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity today to share the successes we've had at the VIP program in helping transitioning servicemen and women prepare for a career in the plumbing and pipe fitting industries, and to offer the UA's views on several bills currently being considered by this committee. First, I'd like to briefly share some information about my background and the important work that we do at VIP. I first joined the UA as a pipe tradesman in Santa Barbara, California in 1987. Soon after that, however, I placed my UA career on hold and joined the United States Navy, where I proudly served as an aviation rescue swimmer and H-46 helicopter mechanic for 11 years. I was honorably discharged from the Navy in 1999 while holding the rank of Petty Officer First Class. Following my discharge from the Navy, I was able to pick up where I had left off at the UA and return to work as a journeyman pipe fitter. After working in the field for several years, I was offered and accepted a position as a training coordinator for a regional apprenticeship program in Southern California, where I facilitated plumbing and pipe fitting training for over 10,000 UA members. I was promoted to executive director of this training fund in 2008, which is the position I held until I accepted my current position at the UA in 2012. In my current position, I manage the day-to-day operations of the 9 VIP training sites located at 7 military installations across the United States. Under the VIP program, the UA offers departing servicemen and women from all branches of the military the opportunity to participate in an intensive 18-week training program on base, which they receive at no cost to either the government or the student. When the training is successfully completed, the graduates are guaranteed a job and are placed in one of the UA's best-in-class gold standard apprenticeship programs. Since its inception, I'm proud to state that the UA VIP program has provided apprenticeship opportunities to over 3,170 military veterans. I know from my own personal experience how valuable it can be when transitioning back to civilian life to feel that an organization like the UA has your back. Reconnecting with my UA brothers and sisters and taking advantage of the work opportunities in this thriving industry certainly made the transition more manageable for me. It has therefore been deeply meaningful for me in my current position to be able to provide a similar experience to other veterans by connecting departing service members with both the training opportunities and support systems provided by the UA VIP program. With this background behind me, I'll now summarize the UA's views regarding several bills currently being considered by this committee. First, the UA would like to express its support for several pending bills mentioned in the hearing invitation I've received. These include H.R. 3601, the Student Veteran Work Modernization Act, H.R. 5190, the Military Family Protection from Debt Act, the draft bill proposing to modify the requirements of the Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship, and the draft bill proposing to waive certain fees that are charged in connection with housing loans guaranteed by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. These are measured, common-sense reforms that will provide tangible benefits to veterans and military families, and which we believe can receive broad bipartisan support. On the other hand, I would also like to take the opportunity to express the UA's opposition to the draft bill titled Consolidating Veterans Employment Services for Improved Performance Act of 2023. Broadly speaking, this bill would transfer the work performed by the Vets Office at the Department of Labor to the Department of Veterans Affairs. While I'm sure this bill is well-intentioned, I believe that it is misguided and would not advance the interests of transitioning service members. The VA has a very important mission, but job creation isn't typically understood as being a significant part of that. On the other hand, I've been working with the DOL Vets Office for 15 years, and I'm consistently impressed with the workforce development experts there. It is my experience that the DOL Vets Office has played an important role in connecting veterans with the apprenticeship programs that are also registered with the DOL. The Vets Office has done a terrific job at facilitating effective communication and collaboration between DOL, DOD, and the VA. I believe that changing the structure of the DOL Vets Office in the manner proposed would result in much more harm than good, and I would therefore ask the committee not to move forward with that particular bill. That concludes my testimony, and I'd like to thank the committee again for this opportunity, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hazard. The written statement of Mr. Hazard will be entered into the hearing record, and we'll now proceed with the questionings, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Keenan, can you comment on the benefits of the current GI Bill comparison tool and whether it would be beneficial to veterans to add information that is currently collected by the Department of Education?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. The more information that we can provide to student veterans, prospective student veterans, so they can make the most well-informed choices for them, we're in favor of. So adding more information, I think, is only going to help people make their decisions.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Bearfield, as the principal mission of DAV is to help rehabilitate support disabled veterans, do you believe H.R. 522, the Delivery for Veterans Act, would be widely used and beneficial for disabled veterans?
Thank you for the question. And the short answer is yes. Service-disabled veterans should not have to pay for a benefit that they've earned to include automobile adaptation. Even if it requires them to have a vehicle shipped to them, this is something that they should not have to incur the cost for.
Thank you very much. Mr. Westcott, do you interpret H.R. 2830 to allow truck driving schools to cross state lines when opening a new branch campus?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Can you maybe explain for folks what the beef is with having stuff from one state to the other? And I ask this because I have the largest contiguous section of the Mississippi River of any member of Congress. So, you know, I can go from Minnesota to Iowa to Illinois within a 15-minute drive. So maybe you could explain some of your reservations about this, please?
Well, certainly, sir. Those reservations are based upon the fact that, for one thing, if we're going to modify the 2-year rule, which I think is an important protection for veterans, while at the same time I understand the need for more truck drivers, it is very important that we're very careful in how we do that. By keeping it within the same state, you have an SA who is familiar with not only the state requirements, but is also familiar with the base institution that they approved. So we're extending that from the one that they've already approved. You know, if we don't safeguard that, then we would be in a situation where somebody could get approval in the state of say, Idaho, and now the 2-year rule is effectively swept away in North Carolina. That's concerning to me, and there's my concern.
I guess we're just having a discussion about contiguous states. It is an issue with us, so we're going to work with you on this. I understand that some tweaks, we can accept that. I'd like real explicit stuff. I know there's great stuff in your written testimony, but truck driving it's a fantastic job, and we can get our guys and gals behind the wheel and actively employed. It'd be fantastic. Mr. Hazard, as a program manager of the UA VIP program, who previously worked as the training coordinator for the Regional Apprenticeship Program, Do you think that HR 3816, the Veterans Entry into Apprenticeship Act, would be helpful for veterans to utilize the GI benefits and gain entry-level experience in the field? And do you have any concerns about this program?
The pre-apprenticeship?
Yeah.
My concern with that, Chairman, is wages. What kind of jobs are those going to be? Apprenticeship is designed with stepped wage increases as you work through the program and you complete the requirements. Pre-apprenticeship implies that you're automatically going to be an apprentice, and there would just have to be some benchmarks in there to ensure that somebody's ready to be an apprentice. But I really think...
I also share some concerns about this, not from that perspective, but from the perspective if you go from pre-apprenticeship program to pre-apprenticeship program to pre-apprenticeship program, you may be burning your GI bills, and by the time you get to where you really want to be, you may not have enough benefits left to complete that degree. So let's talk about this in the future.
Okay.
But because I understand Mr. James' intent, and I think it's very valid. We just got to figure out how to do it properly to make sure that the veterans are well served. And with that, I yield back my, what? No? With that, I yield back and recognize Mr. Levin, Ranking Member Levin, for 5 minutes.
Thank the chairman. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Keenan, I'll start with you. I want to thank the VFW for their support of the Valor Act. VA noted in its testimony on the bill that some veterans postpone using the home loan benefit until after they receive their ratings so they can avoid paying the funding fee. What impact does that have on their financial well-being and housing stability, especially during the period of transition?
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, for that question. We know that the first 12 months after somebody separates from the military is the most critical and where they have the highest risk for suicide. So housing instability is a big concern for us. A transitioning service member who's filed a VA disability claim should not have to wait for VA to make a decision, a life decision to purchase a home, which creates stability for them and their family and their children. So we want them to have this be a stress-free process and to be reassured if they do receive a rating later from VA that they can get that feedback.
Well, I appreciate that. And a related issue, some transitioning service members close on a home before receiving their rating, often because they erroneously think they're going to be refunded later. In fact, this happened to a constituent of ours who brought this to our attention and prompted our team to write this bill. Question is, do you believe the current inability of individuals in this situation to receive a refund once they get a rating is consistent with the spirit of the fee waiver?
So I don't think that was the intention of the fee waiver. And I think particularly for this group of transitioning service members to veterans, that there should be this allowance for them because the process may be lengthy for VA. We know there's a bit of a backlog at the moment, so we want to make sure that there's no frustration for them in this process.
Thank you for that. I also appreciate VFW's suggestion to use the effective date rather than the date of examination. My understanding is that the effective date can't be earlier than the day after separation. So individuals who close on their homes while on active duty wouldn't be considered eligible for a refund. Can you speak to that?
I'd have to look into that. If they could use their intent to file date, which would be the earliest possible date, if that would be affected by their date of discharge. We'd have to look into that and ask our team.
Happy to follow up on that one and grateful for your support again. And it's an example of a constituent having an issue that is leading to legislation. Hopefully, if there's any veteran listening to this, contact your member of Congress, particularly if they're on this committee, and you never know. We might be able to do something about it legislatively. I will turn to you, Mr. Hazard, because I know that you had to reschedule and you came from Idaho, et cetera, and also because I represent Camp Pendleton and I had the chance to go and visit the UA's VIP program there. Shout out to my friend Sean Keone Ellis from the UA. Wanted to ask you what we can do to improve access to employees and their ability to access SkillBridge. So I know you've got a tremendous amount of experience with SkillBridge. I know that it's both DOL and DOD, but I'd love if you could share with the time that we have left thoughts that you have on SkillBridge.
Absolutely. SkillBridge is a life changer, really. It's changed the way we transition out of the military for the better. It's guarantees, it's a smooth transition from the military into the workforce with guaranteed employment. That's the way the UA does it. I think we need to look at the utilization of SkillBridge by transitioning service members before we worry about getting more employers involved. Because right now, some of our military partners are reporting to us that it's 5 to 10% utilization of transitioning service members. I know from personally, my son was attached to an EOD unit, and his commander's policy was nobody's going to SkillBridge. We need to get some guidance in there and some teeth in SkillBridge so people that want to participate can. But, you know, talking about the employers and the SkillBridge providers, we need to do a better job at screening those folks too. What it's supposed to be is employment, and it's supposed to be at little or no cost to the service member, and it's supposed to have a high probability of employment. And very few of those providers are doing that.
Thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member 11. In accordance with committee rules, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Dunn from Iowa be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing without objection. The chair now recognizes Mr. Subcommittee from the great state of Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always good to see you, sir. And thanks to all the witnesses for being here today to discuss and provide feedback on a number of bills. I've enjoyed your testimonies. I've had the pleasure of touring the University of Arizona's Veterans Education and Transition Services, or VETS as it's called, center in September, and I was able to hear firsthand from veterans and issues they face when seeking higher education. On one topic that came up was the monthly housing allowance for online students. As you know, veterans taking online classes currently only receive half of the national average for their monthly housing allowance. And post-COVID, more student veterans are choosing online classes. For example, a constituent who is a gunnery sergeant in the U.S. Marines who is dealing with this issue reached out to me in the message. He said, and I quote, "The MHA rate has been a massive influence on my decision and ability to use my earned benefits." End quote. Especially for veterans like him who have families or other time commitments, taking online classes can provide much needed flexibility. I also met a young retired, formerly served single mother in the Veterans Center under the same issue. That the reason she was taking these classes was because of her situation with her kids, and she needed, that was what worked for her. And I was pleased that my friend and chairman here, Chairman Van Orden, partner with us and me in introducing HR 5702, the Expanding Access for Online Veteran Students Act, which would increase the monthly housing allowance for veteran students taking online classes to match the amount students receive for in-person classes. While this bill is limited to the summer semester, I believe it's important. It's an important step in bringing parity in MHA reimbursements for in-person and online students. So my first quick question here to Ms. Keenan, how has education changed for VFW's membership in recent years? And have you seen a greater number of VFW memberships attend online school?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Subcommittee. So we know that veterans are often non-traditional students. They may have a spouse, dependents, they may work, they may have service-connected disabilities that limit their ability to go and do things in person every single day. So our membership is attending more and more online classes, but the essence of why we support this bill is because we want students to have the flexibility to choose what is best for their life circumstances. And the housing benefit is going to ensure that they're successful, that they have the stability that they need.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Barlett, I appreciate the testimony you submitted to the committee and the assistance our office received from Student Veterans of America in drafting this legislation. In your testimony, both written and today, you mentioned Josh Jones, who was previously the SVA chapter president at Loyola University. Can you elaborate why the MHA for online students can be difficult for students as they enroll in classes with limited availability?
Yes, thank you, Representative Subcommittee. And actually, Josh Jones is in town this week. As Student Veteran of the Year, he is placed on SVA's Board of Directors, and they're all having a meeting right now.
Wonderful.
So looking at, as a student veteran, you're looking at not just the degree that you're pursuing, but the institution that you want to pursue that degree. But then you also have the opportunity to keep in mind that you have two choices. You can do brick and mortar, or you can do an online class. And even as Josh faced, a brick and mortar was his intention, but as he went along his degree, his summer classes were forced online. So a budget that he had produced for himself had the MHA all lined up that he would be a brick and mortar and have that institution, MHA, kind of like took him for a step back when his classes were forced online during the summer session, and then he was forced online, then decreasing by almost $5,000 for that 3-month term. Like Ms. Keaton mentioned, for student veterans, we have a lot of things going on in our life. I myself took my master's degree online prior to COVID at George Washington University, and I felt the education I got at that time really helped me sustain to where I am right now. Not only was the classes an opportunity to fit within my schedule, but I studied globally with other students from around the world. And I was able to share my culture as a veteran and American and how I was seeing our health system at that time, and then also getting ideas and seeing other things through other individuals' eyes. So by the time I was finished with my master's degree, I had a better perspective.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Subcommittee. The chair now recognizes Ms. Ramirez from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman. In the first panel, we talked a little bit about housing, and certainly we started talking also about employment. I want to thank every single witness for being here. I know that the last few weeks we've been trying to get our committee hearings up and running, so we're glad you're here. I want to also just give a special thank you to the Student Veterans of America for your critical work you do to ensure that veterans receive and maximize their education benefits. As you know, self-improvement and self-sufficiency are interconnected with education, employment, and housing. And often I say that housing stability intersects with financial stability, and therefore education and employment are critical to that. I want to go in a little bit more on housing, which we did a little in the first panel, but I think it's just following up to what Congressman Subcommittee was talking about, particularly around housing allowance. Any of you, can you describe how important it is for veterans to have access to housing and the kinds of barriers veterans face when they don't have that full housing allowance?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. I will go first. By not having that parity of the monthly housing allowance, kind of kicks off their budget for their monthly ideals and how they can expense the rest of their expenses through their budget. I know myself, my rent is the first thing I pay. And if I don't have that money up full, that kind of puts me behind for everything else. And financial security in a house is going to give you safety. And safety is just going to help your mental stability as you're going through and studying and being that individual in your community and that family member that your family needs.
Yeah, thank you. I want to switch a little, and I want to ask Ms. Bartlett, specifically the legislation titled Expanding Access for Online Veteran Student Act. It would aim to make all programs for all students eligible for full MHA during summer terms. That has resulted in this proposal having a significant cost according to the CBO. Is this proposal the ideal way you would aim to assist students experiencing particular hardships accessing individual programs? Or would you model legislation differently to assist students?
So this piece of legislation is definitely a starter conversation. And we hope that this leads to more conversations to have the parity of MHA as an online learner and as a brick and mortar learner.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. The chair now recognizes Mr. Nunn from the great state of Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say thank you to our fearless chairman here from the great state of Wisconsin, both a VFW and an American Legion fellow. I appreciate your service and honored to serve with you in that capacity in our new roles today. With that, I'd like to take us back to where we are presently. Many in this community are combat veterans like ourselves. Others are members of our community who are watching as equally horrified as I am with the events unfolding in Israel. The destruction of that community forces us as Americans to reflect upon our own service, our commitment to our family, our friends, and those who we live with. I'm here today not just as a U.S. member of Congress, but as a 20-year Air Force veteran who has served in combat operations, as many here around the world. But it's as a commander, I watched my own forces struggle with life that came after their military service. And so today I carry before us a message for those who can no longer speak. Specifically, I speak in honor of Corporal Adam Lambert, a proud Marine from Adel, Iowa, in my home community. He loved his family, he loved his friends, and he loved his country. He put himself before family, friends, and country time after time. Adam bravely served our country in the Marines, deploying to Okinawa and then on to Afghanistan. And during boot camp, he made a battle buddy named Daniel Harvey from Rhode Island. These two became fast friends and connected through their deployments and tried to maintain that through their return home to the U.S. But at 22 years old, Daniel became a victim of suicide just after a year leaving the Marines. Adam, his best friend, followed with him less than a month later. Adam was a beloved son and a brother and a friend. Unfortunately, this story is all too common for our fellow service members when they come home from duty. And in my home state of Iowa, sadly, we have a suicide rate for veterans 4 times that of the national average. Something, Mr. Chair, has to be done. And that's why I'm proud to work with members in this room when I led the introduction of H.R. 3722. The Daniel J. Harvey Jr. and Adam Lambert Improving Service Member Transition to Reduce Veteran Suicide Act. As we all know, veteran suicide is another casualty of war, one that demands immediate attention and action by our members of Congress. I want to thank you to the committee is here today and speak a little more specifically on what we can do to continue to help our veterans as they transition at some point from their military life to their civilian life. And so, Ms. Bearfield, I'll begin with you. First, I want to thank you for your support. I want to speak specifically to the Transition Assistance Program and speak to any issues that have gone unnoticed or overlooked in recent years and how we could continue to improve this program even further, sir.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my oral statement, when I went through the TAP program more than 25 years ago, and the way that I felt after I left my years of service with the United States Army, there were days where I just felt I was thrown away. I got a service-connected disability and was released basically because of the fact that I was non-deployable anymore. And in those initial months after service, I felt like nobody really cared. And being able to have mental health services available to me during that time frame would have been very beneficial. I didn't do the ultimate act like the gentleman that you mentioned earlier, but it wasn't far from my thought process. And being able to have those services available are crucial because you're talking about a very tender time period. Those first 12 months after being medically retired, or discharged from service is a very tender time. And a lot of service members are out in the fog about what to do or what's available to them. So being able to indicate and note those services are there for them is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Bearfield. I would agree. Deputy Director Keenan, thank you for your service as well and your continued service with the VFW. You recommended including provisions that would require a health assessment and treatment plans to be conducted in private at the VA. Talk to us about what the current practice is and if there's any recommendations you'd have on that front for mental health.
Thank you for that question. I think our recommendation has to do with including this in TAP and having an opportunity within the program for some one-on-one private counseling if that's required by the service member, if they seek that, so that they can actually discuss some of those issues maybe outside of the class, but still with somebody who can provide the resources that they need.
Much appreciated. Thank you. We can all be strong and uniform, but as we make that transition, we need that access to it. Mr. Chair, I yield my time and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, sir. And Mr. Nunn, you are always welcome here, and I hope you understand that the support behind your bill is unanimous. And there's a couple things we got to tweak on it, but you know, it is my number one legislative priority as the chairman of the subcommittee to prevent veteran suicide. We're good? And he's an Air Force guy. So, you know. I want to thank everybody. What was that? That's right. I want to thank everybody for coming here today. It's critically important that we get together periodically and talk about these things. And before I turn it over to Ranking Member Levin, Ms. Keenan, I understand that there's some people that came to this committee hearing today.
Yes, I have my family here.
If you're related to this veteran, please stand up. Okay. Yeah. And then there's that guy right there at the mask on. What's his name? Go, hey, stand up, you. Hey, I'm talking to you, pal. What's your name, son? And you're an Army veteran. And what are you doing 48 hours from now? That's right, he's getting married! Hey, if you want, when we get done here, get your family and everybody come up. We'll take pictures behind here and everything. It's a big day. So congratulations very much. You guys are all awesome. And I now recognize Ranking Member Levin for his closing comments.
I can't follow that. We'll just leave it there. Appreciate it.
This hearing stands adjourned.